Once again, thank you everyone for joining. We're really excited to have the opportunity to talk through the setting up of an influencer campaign from start to finish. So the idea here is that we are going to be looking at all of the different aspects of creating an influencer campaign to hopefully give you the tools, whether you are starting out from scratch or whether it's something that you've already been doing for a while and that you're looking to expand upon. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone there. But just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know who we are, Freestak is a platform designed and built to connect brands with content creators and influencers. We work specifically in the outdoor and endurance sports sector at the moment, but we're obviously looking to expand. We believe that one of the things that works very well for us is that we are in a niche, so we're only going to move into new sectors when we feel as though we're able to cater to that niche effectively. So currently run, cycle, adventure, outdoors and snow sports are our main areas of expertise. As part of our offering, we have a community of content creators who have signed up to the Freestak platform, currently at around about 1,800 with a reach of just under 30 million. These people are verified, validated, vetted, all the V's. They only get to join the platform community when we know that they're the kind of people that are going to actually deliver value to our clients. Talking of which, we have been running Freestak as a platform for around about 4 years, and in that time we've had the opportunity to work with a number of brands. There are some household names there, some really big brands that we're very proud to have worked with, but also similarly some brands that are much more in the growth phase or startup brands, smaller brands. And one of the great things about influencer marketing, and I have to say the way that the platform has been built, is that whether you are a household name looking to run a campaign or an influencer campaign with hundreds and hundreds of influencers, or you're starting out and you're looking to just find a small number of sort of perfect fit influencers for your brand, that we can offer you a solution. So no matter big or small, there's something for everybody. Just to introduce us, my name is Simon Freeman. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Freestak. And the bulk of this presentation will be by my colleague Gabriel Briggs. He is one of the account managers and works very closely with the brands, making sure that the campaigns that they're running on the Freestak platform are delivered effectively. So Gab's got loads and loads of experience. So this is very much in his wheelhouse. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about, we thought we'd start off with a very brief introduction to influencer marketing. So just to kind of set the scene and really kind of define what it is that we are talking about. Gab is then going to take us through the anatomy of a campaign, looking at all of the different elements that are required for success. We're then going to talk a little bit about campaign ideation, so what it takes to come up with a campaign that is not only going to engage and enthrall your target audience, but also is an idea that influencers and content creators want to get involved in, which is really important. And then because of the situation that we're all in, we're going to touch very briefly on influencer marketing during COVID-19. Just a couple of slides just to sort of think a little bit about how things are a little bit different now from how they have been before the COVID-19 crisis started. I think we'll be around about 40 minutes. I think if you've got questions, we're happy to answer them. You'll also find an email address at the end of this. So I'll say it now and we'll emphasize it a few times. Obviously, what we're talking about here is fairly generalist. If you have specific questions that relate to your brand or your business or the challenges that you're facing, then please, at the end, you'll see an email address. Just drop us a line and we'd love to give you some sort of specific advice that relates directly to your business and what you're trying to achieve. So that's it. I'm going to hand over to Gab now and let him start taking you through this presentation. Over to you, Gab.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for joining us, guys. Yeah, it's really always a nice opportunity to be able to talk about what we do every day and what we love. So we're obviously here to talk a little bit about how you can get started or how you can start an influencer campaign. So obviously we're talking about sort of the initial steps that help you get involved and get you moving. Of course, we hope that there'll be some value for brands that are a little bit more established in their journey, whether they've done influencer campaigns or have an ambassador program already. I'm sure we can provide some value there as well. But certainly, just for some context, this is certainly geared towards brands that are looking to commence that journey. So let's start with the obvious question: why influencers? Now, this could be an hour or 2 hours webinar in and of itself. So certainly we're not looking to do an exhaustive sell for influencers. We hope that you already understand and believe in what influencers can do. But I did think it might be helpful for me just to share a few of the reasons why I think are very particular to influencers as to why they're really beneficial. So probably the top two we know reasonably well. Influencers obviously have an ability to create engaging content. I mean, they're often even termed content creators. It's the 101 of what they do. And of course, that's accompanied with an audience. They're able to distribute brand messages to a target audience. And oftentimes that's really the two of why brands want to work with them. They can create content and disseminate it effectively. But I think what I really love about the way that they can work is that each influencer or ambassador or content creator, whatever you want to call them, each person or influencer has a really specific relationship with their audience. And what I mean by that is the audiences that the influencers that you follow or your brand work with, their audiences aren't duplicated. They're not, no two are the same. So when I follow someone, I know very clearly why I'm following them and what I'm getting out of that relationship and what I'm sort of following along their content for. What do I get? And so I think the thing is that I encourage brands to keep in mind is it's really important to make sure you're working with the right people that have the appropriate relationship with their audience. Because if you do that effectively and you're talking to the right audience, there's almost no other way that you can get that cut through. Your audience has been that specific audience has been spoken to by a trusted person. And of course, that's the quickest way for your brand to be able to achieve that credibility and authenticity within your given sector, which is the holy grail of brand marketing. So I think that's just one of the things that I really love about influencers is their unique relationship with their audience. Now, why now? I certainly don't want to give the doom and gloom of this current situation. I think there's probably enough of that in the world at the moment. But I think there are two particular points that are really pertinent to the current situation. And the reality is traditional marketing is somewhat compromised. We already know of the many events that are being postponed or cancelled. And of course, that affects marketing to a fairly significant extent. And it's certainly not limited to events, the compromised nature of marketing at the moment. But one of the more specific things which does touch on this is the travel restrictions that limit brands from being present at events at the moment or at moments, at big brand moments. And ambassadors or influencers are going to be really important in the future, I think, because they're going to allow brands to be present for moments that they're used to being at. If the London Marathon goes ahead in October, the number of brands that rely on having a physical presence there that feasibly won't be able to travel, or their company or brand or legal team won't allow them to travel, it's going to be huge. And to have trusted people that you work with that understand how to communicate your brand message on the ground is going to be really important. So I think there's some particular reasons as to why now.
If I could just jump in there and add to that, I think that one of the interesting things that we're finding a lot is that content creators are looking for sort of relationships with brands rather than, we're not talking about the kinds of people who, certainly in our sector, the kinds of people who want to do a pay per post type thing. They want to kind of build a relationship with a brand in the longer term. So I think Gav's point is really valid, which is when things start to return to normal, and we're already starting to see brands coming back already now and saying that they want to have campaigns up and running by, middle of May or the end of June, beginning of June. It's worth investing in relationships with content creators even now, because by the time you want them to be talking about your brand or your products or your events or your services, you need to have had some relationship with those people, at least for some period of time. Otherwise, it's always going to feel really inauthentic, which can often do more harm than good. So that's another reason why now is a good time to start getting involved in this kind of activity.
Absolutely. And I think it's important also just to point out a few differences or specific points that refer to influencers and ambassadors in the endurance and outdoor sport sector, which is obviously where we sort of operate within. I mean, the reality is the majority of the people that we team up with brands, they're exercising anywhere from 3, 4, 5 times a week, and obviously each of those moments creates an opportunity for content generation. So it's quite easy and authentic to be able to create genuine content of you doing the thing. If you're a running influencer, you're running 3 or 4 times a week. It's not forced to be able to create that content. So it's so to speak, it's almost easy enough for a brand to slot in and align themselves with those moments. We're constantly at the moment looking for positive content and positive stories, and the reality is the people that we work with are typically really experienced at being able to create that positive content and do positive things with the content. One of the absolute missions of our brand at Freestak is to help inspire people to become more active, and this is the 101 of what our community of content creators do. The reality is this is almost their mission statement themselves. So there's a really positive twist to the content they're producing, which I think is especially valuable for influencers within our sector. And to that effect, they're able to create real value to their audience. So it's not just that they're posting pictures of themselves and that doesn't create value for their audiences. That's not at all the case with this sector. It's whether it's nutrition or exercise tips, whether it's inspiration to get active or education in any sense of the word. There's real value being sort of bestowed upon their audience, which is wonderful, I think. And obviously, what that all ties into is the big A word, the authenticity. If they are indeed exercising that frequently, they're inherently extremely authentic, which is wonderful. So now let's just touch on the anatomy of a campaign. So starting to get into a little bit of the steps to be able to create an influencer campaign. So this is the wheel, the campaign wheel that we often refer back to. So this is very much the steps that influencers will engage with in the content creation, in the campaign creation process. So obviously, it's a step-by-step process. You can't skip from steps 1 to 7 to 3 to 6. You do need to work your way through, and I won't go through each of them in detail because we will sort of move through them. But one point that I thought might be worth just highlighting is the content generation phase is step 5. Now, the reality is that's the bulk of what you get out of the campaign. That's where the your investment sort of reaps its reward. But there's 7 other steps, and there's 4 steps before you get to that stage, and each of those steps are really important. You need to sow the seed, and you need to make sure that you've done the work and followed the correct processes, so that once you get to step 5, you are really starting to get back what you deserve and the work that you've put in. So the success of these campaigns aren't done on any one of these processes. You really do need to sort of follow the flow and repeat. And that's where the successful campaigns really come to. And for the purposes of this campaign, we're really going to focus on steps 1, which is publishing a campaign. How do you create a campaign? How do you manage your applicants and select them, and then obviously seed them or send them the product? Of course, the content generation phase is absolutely key, making sure that you're getting what you want and monitoring that. And then there's an additional step here, which sort of sits outside of the wheel, which is analyzing and understanding the campaign, the successes or failures of the campaign. So let's start with the first thing that you need to do, which is researching and defining what your campaign is going to be. So truly understanding what the point of all this is and what you're looking to achieve. So I've put singular objective there, and that's obviously for a very specific reason, and that is, it's very difficult to go into a campaign saying we want to achieve amazing brand awareness and credibility, we want to sell, you know, X amount of shoes, we want to create beautiful content. Of course, there is interplay between these three objectives, but it's really important to set your objective as a singular and then know that the other two are likely to come as a bit of a happy byproduct. But it really is important in terms of the people that you look to work with, the campaign brief, how you structure it, how you analyze it post-campaign. It's really important to have a singular objective and then understand what that you're likely to get the bonus of the other two. So for example, if you're looking to generate brand awareness, this could be anything from credibility or authenticity in a sector. It might even be how you want to position as a brand. So if you're a brand that's well known but not particularly well known for your ethical credentials, maybe that's a play that you want to make, and you want brand awareness to be associated with how you're positioned in the market. And so that is an objective of yours. And awareness is a really popular and really common objective of brands working with influencers. Content creation is I think a really underrated, certainly increasing in popularity as well, objective for working with influencers. And I think the point I want to stress here is that it's an incredibly cost-effective way of generating what we call user-generated content, or UGC. And this can be really valuable for website, for social ads, for your own social media feeds. We all know how important and valuable content is, and how difficult it can be to get from paid photo shoots, or how expensive it can be. So obviously, this is a really valuable way of getting a massive bank of authentic content. And of course, then it just gets distributed as well, which is always a bonus. Sales and leads, they're typically not the first thing that we see brands start with. It's very difficult to start an influencer campaign and go straight into the selling. Of course, this is often achieved through things like affiliate links. You can obviously drive people to sign up, and lead generation type from landing pages and similar processes. But this is often the more mature version of influencer marketing or ambassadors. Typically, this is introduced down the line a little bit once your audience is familiar, and that's something we would encourage. But absolutely, it's an objective of some. So there's a few key questions that I think you need to, once you've set your objective, it's really important to ask yourself these questions. And these will feed into your brief. So this is keeping in mind, you're basically going through and answering these questions, and this will feed into your brief. And we won't dwell on them too much, but obviously it's really important to set the number of influencers. A campaign with between 1 and 5 influencers, or 10 or 100, are functionally quite different. And of course, that's a really important place to start. You don't need to know an exact number, but an approximation is important. Your influencer persona is something that's super crucial to set. It's important to make sure that the audience that we're speaking about a moment ago is what you're actually addressing, and it obviously fits in with your customer profile. So it's hyper critical to think about things. It could be as simple as gender or age. It could be much more specific about whether it's a performance mindset, or someone that's a bit more just happy to get outside and get moving. There's a lot of variables that you can think about, and I would encourage you to think about your customer profile and set the influencer persona to make sure you're talking to the right people. What you're offering, we'll touch on this a little bit in a moment, but obviously it's crucial to be really clear on what you're providing, what value you're giving to the influencer. And of course, this isn't as simple as necessarily how much you're paying them. That's certainly one part of the conversation, but it doesn't sort of start and end there. But obviously it's important to set that for your brief. The timeline is the crux of a campaign. Failing to think about this critically is a really challenging place to start. So I think the timeline, people often jump to what timeline they want the content to come out. Maybe they say, okay, we're launching a new hat, and it's going to go live on the 1st of June. So therefore we want content from 1st of June to the 1st of July, for example. But I think timeline actually is probably what I'd encourage you to think much more about is the setup phase. How long are you going to take to prep the campaign and understand what your objectives are, put the brief together, for example. Then how long is it going to take to recruit the people? And importantly, how long is it going to take to get the right sizes and send the product? That may indeed be a week or two very quickly. So it might be a month or so from the campaign being briefed to actually getting content live. And I think accurately phasing that timeline is really important. Otherwise, you may indeed find that content's not going live until mid-June, and you've missed that launch date, which was obviously a critical moment for the brand. Now, geo-targets sounds like a simple one. You might know that you want to sell into or focus on Germans and Germany and UK, for example. But what I think is important to note here is if someone's German or British, it doesn't necessarily mean that their followers reflect that. And obviously you're speaking with them to be able to make sure you're communicating with an audience in Germany and the UK. So using data to inform that decision is really important. We've done a webinar on Tuesday about this. So we're going to be putting the recording out of that in due course. So there'll be an email about that. We'll be posting it on LinkedIn. So if you're wanting to understand how you can use data to inform these questions, please do check that out. But yeah, certainly geo-targeting and looking at where the audience lies is certainly a key question. And of course, the deliverables. What are you looking to get back? This is not always simple. And if you do want to just run anything past us or have any questions, please do let us know. I think this is probably the point that experience comes into play more than any other. And of course, it's intrinsically linked with your offer. But certainly it's something that you learn with experience, and it's important to make sure that you're setting something that's really clear there. But I would stress probably err on the side of what is reasonable. And then if you have a really good relationship with the influencers, they'll go above and beyond. Whereas if you're asking from the outset far too much, you're going to struggle to get the right people, and they're going to not feel inclined to go above and beyond and give you that additional earned media value.
I think just to add again to what Gab just said before we move on to the next slide, these questions has come from kind of years of running influencer campaigns on behalf of brands. And one of the things that we found when we started out was that often on both sides of the relationship, so both the brands that we were working with and the content creators or the influencers, there was a bit of frustration. There was a sense of neither party feeling as though they'd really got what they were hoping out of the campaign or the ambassador program. And we figured out quite quickly that that was because of a lack of clarity. Content creators weren't sure how much they should be posting, or what kind of stuff they should be posting, or when, or what they were getting in return. And similarly, brands were kind of frustrated that they weren't getting what they were expecting, or So these questions have really been distilled down from a number of years of experience, where we've tried to, if you follow these steps and you work out the answer to all these questions, you'll remove a lot of the uncertainty and the kind of frustration that can come down the line. So that's it's well worth doing this exercise.
So in terms of the selection process, we've got a few do's and don'ts on the next slide, and this is very much a step-by-step process. So obviously the first thing you need to do is establish a connection, and importantly there, what is the mode or vehicle that you're going to use? Is it a campaign on a platform like Freestak, or is it a series of Instagram messages or an Instagram post on your brand channels? Understanding how you create and establish that connection is the first step, absolutely. Putting together and providing a brief to the influencers based off the questions we've just gone through, step 2. Gathering the relevant information. So this is the most simple but most crucial step. What size are they? Where do they live? Are they going to be on holiday? It's really important to make sure that your information is up to date, and that allows you to do step 4, which is of course seed, which is send product. And this again, it's the most simple step of probably the campaign, but it's the one that if it goes wrong, your campaign dates will go out the window. And as Simon said, it creates a bit of frustration on both ends. And it's one that I would stress to get right and make sure your dates allow you to do that, and you've given yourself enough time to seed that product. And finally, what's really important is just restating once everything's set. You're a couple of days out from the campaign going live, just restating the campaign agreement and posting regulations that are in that country. What does the ASA say about how to hashtag ad, things like that. Making sure that you've stated what you're comfortable with there, and potentially offering a style guide, so a mood board, helping them understand the type of content you're looking for. So this is very much a step-by-step. Now we'll look at a few do's and don'ts of the selection process. And I think the first thing to remember is, you're dealing with humans, and you yourself are a human. So while they might be well known and potentially sometimes even, there's some, I've known people to be a little bit starstruck when they're approaching sort of reasonably big influencers, but you aren't the brand. You're Gab from marketing, and I think, of course, you want to speak to them on behalf of the brand, and it's really important to have the weight of that behind you. But I think the best relationships that are made are between people, and I think don't be shy to speak to them as a person. Being really clear in the ask and the reward is absolutely crucial, and Simon mentioned exactly why. It prevents any frustration, and I think honouring that, of course, is crucial, but making sure from the outset that you're really clear in that. Now, communication, it goes without saying, but I think it's the same as that first point. If you're really human about it, you're communicating with them, you're engaging in their content. It's a really effective way of building that relationship so that they're more likely to work with you. Using data to inform your selection is crucial. Again, our data webinar on Tuesday goes into this, but looking at things like which metrics are you using to shortlist? Are you looking solely at the person's followers? Are you looking a little bit deeper into it and having a look at what their engagement levels are like and their audience demographics, for example? Really understanding who you're actually working with is really important. And certainly I would encourage you to dig a little bit deeper than the numbers that are maybe immediately apparent, because of course, audience and authenticity, whether the followers are real, for example, is something that you might not know from the initial look. And there are certainly tools that we explored in the data conversation on Tuesday that will help you inform that selection. The don'ts, this could be a longer list, but I think these are the two pillars of the don't category. And I certainly don't want to be too negative, but I think one thing that I often encourage brands not to do is being too prescriptive. Now, you'll certainly have an idea of what your brand campaign wants to be, and you'll be able to provide them some, like a mood board, as I mentioned, as to the type of content you're looking for. But the reality is we encourage you to work with content creators because they've got their own style, and their audiences follow them for that style. They're not obviously following them for your brand imagery or anything like that. So I think allowing them to tell your story through their lens and through their way of communicating is really important. So I think there's a real balance between making sure that it is on brand and it's not jarring from your perspective, but also allows them to tell it in their way is something I'd really encourage you to do. And of course, this is a similar point to the above, but I would encourage you not to rely on surface level stats like followers. At the very least, look at engagement and have a look at their audience as well to understand who indeed you are working with. Now, once we're in the content generation phase, the campaign's live, we're up and running, what do we need to make sure that we're doing? Now, I think this is something we've mentioned already, but communicating really regularly is hyper important. It starts with ensuring the kit has arrived safely. The reality is a lot of times brands might get into trouble because they'll be 2 weeks in and realize someone hasn't posted and maybe get a bit frustrated and contact them. And it turns out that the kit never arrived. And so we've missed 2 weeks of the campaign and wasted a bit of frustration along the way. So simple things like ensuring the kit's arrived is a really important step to begin with. Liking and commenting on posts, your brand's going to be getting a tag in it. And if you're monitoring the social feeds, it's so powerful just to be able to just engage in the content, let them know that it's being seen and that you're loving it, and give them that positive affirmation. It's really valuable and will build that relationship really quickly. Friendly reminders, if indeed there are key moments of the campaign. Products launching tomorrow, guys. 1 week to go before we finish up. if you're sending those comms, it makes sure that the campaign remains on track and it's ticking along as you'd like. If you're silent, it's really difficult to expect that people are going to be sticking perfectly to deadlines. So gentle reminders are good. And if you've built the relationship based off steps 1 and 2, you're going to provide yourself license to be able to give those reminders. And of course, providing constructive and positive feedback wherever possible is a really good way to encourage that relationship. Now, obviously, it's key to keep track of what's going on. So obviously monitoring the posts as we go throughout the campaign is really important. How many posts are we meeting the obligations asked for? Is the content on brand from a qualitative perspective? Are they using the right text, the right language? Is the images, if you want to make sure that all your image is really dynamic and full of movement, is that indeed being adhered to? And that's where that feedback sort of comes into play. And maybe one thing to note as well, is the audience engaging? Are they asking about the products, and is there a conversation taking place? Because often that's where the really successful campaigns, they're told through the engagement of the audience and the comments. So certainly something to keep track of here, I think, for sure. Now this can be a really difficult step, and to be perfectly honest, this is a large part of why Freestak and similar platforms exist. So of course, it's something that we're happy to talk to you a little bit about how you can track posts. It can indeed be a manual exercise, and of course that's okay as well. It can be time consuming, but certainly, an Excel sheet is one way to track it. A platform like Freestak or other influencer marketing platforms is certainly a way to do it as well. So something just to keep in mind. Now we want to come back to when we're analyzing the campaign. So we're looking back and checking in to see how we went. Of course, this is a really important step to know if we've gone right or not. And it's the first place to start, as I alluded to earlier in the conversation, is restating your objective, because obviously, depending whether your objective was sales or content creation or indeed awareness, how you're assessing the success of the campaign differs significantly. So there are quantitative and qualitative ways we would look to assess a campaign, and oftentimes, in fact, almost always, we will look to use a combination of them. So obviously things like what's your reach and how many impressions did you get, how many engagements and what was the engagement rate are certainly ways that we'll look to encourage you to assess a campaign. I'm not going to go into too much about what these terms mean for the moment. Again, this is certainly the conversation we had on the data and insights conversation on Tuesday, and that is on our LinkedIn page if you do want to listen back to that, or we will be posting that in the coming days. But these are certainly ways that we encourage you to assess your campaign, and how much each engagement costs is cost per engagement, earned media value, what is the dollar value of the media that you've generated, so the likes, the comments, the shares, the views of your campaign, what's the value of that, and there's ways you can calculate that. But I would never rely on quantitative. I would always look at, again, was the audience engaged? Was the content on brand? And is the story being told through the text, the words that are being used literally, and of course the imagery. So if you've got a combination of the two, if you feel like the story is being told and you've reached a really large number of people and you've had the sufficient engagement, I think you can be really confident you've had a good result there. So now I just want to quickly talk a little bit about campaign ideation. So this comes back to the first point. We're almost going to go back a step again. So those were the 4 steps of creating, setting up a campaign, choosing the right people, monitoring it, and analyzing it. Now, I think the most difficult part, and probably the essence of this webinar, is about how we actually create a campaign. So we're just going to take it back a step again and ask a few questions to ourselves about where we start and how do we ideate this campaign. So the 4 key questions I think we need answers to are here. And I think at the heart of creating the right campaign is actually in asking yourself these questions. So, I mean, what's an obvious challenge here is that I'm conscious that we'll be talking to brands here that have very different campaign concepts or marketing plans or agendas or objectives. So of course we can't give any specific examples, but the reality is if you're asking yourself the right questions, I think you will be really far along in terms of being able to create an effective campaign. So we'll start with these questions. So obviously, what are your broader marketing activities and plans? What are you up to, and what can you integrate? What assets does your brand currently have access to? And we'll explain why that's important. What story are you telling as a brand, and how we can use that to our advantage? And of course, we're coming back to the same question time and time again. What is the purpose of this campaign? So let's start with the first question, marketing activity. So this is not going to be an exhaustive list, but I think you really do need to, the easiest way to integrate influencers successfully is restating or understanding what you're up to. What else are you doing? You might have a product launch coming up, for example, that you want to facilitate the reach. You want to grow the reach of a product launch, and you integrate influencers into that. There might be an event that you're hosting or partnering with, and you bring influencers along to promote the reach there. There might be technical features that you're looking to educate on. Maybe you're finding that you've innovated this wonderful product, and it's really difficult to articulate that to your audience through traditional media. And so having someone to be able to tell the story of it that understands the technical features and is maybe a bit of like a technology nerd almost, maybe they're the best person to be able to communicate that. So understanding where you're at in your marketing, there's so many different ways you can integrate influencers, whether it's boosting awareness, communicating technical aspects, or even helping you create the concept. They're creative people, they are content creators. So even if you're not sure, if you say to them, we're looking to launch this new series of kit, how do you think we can communicate it? They might actually be able to play a role in that. So I'm a little bit conscious of time, so I'll be relatively brief here. And of course, if you have any other questions or want to see how we can apply these questions to your brand, please do get in touch. But I'll skip through. So brand assets, I think there's a really important question here about what you're offering influencers. And I think the question we get time and time again is, how much do I need to pay, or what do I need to pay? And of course, a financial transaction is a simple and effective way of working with influencers. And I'm certainly not here to say that that's not a good idea. It is. And I think that's often, a great way of respecting your influencers that you're working with time. But you can lean on your brand assets here as well. So if you're, an event and you've got an apparel company, an apparel partner, for example, perhaps the best way to bundle an offer is say, you can have free tickets to our event. We've got an apparel and a nutrition partner. We've got some kit from them as well. We're going to get you, and all of a sudden it creates a really valuable package. And what's really neat about that example is that those partnerships actually end up getting cross promotion almost. They almost get an influencer campaign by default, because the influencer is there to promote your brand, your event. But if they're wearing the apparel and eating the nutrition of your partners, you're creating value for them. So it's a really good way of being able to build those relationships and assets that you've got as a sort of happy byproduct of the campaign that you're running. Might jump to the next slide, Simon.
Oh, sorry.
So storytelling. So I think there's two really interesting questions to ask yourself here, and they're quite simple ones. But your brand is going to have a story and a message that it's looking to tell. And I think, of course, influencers can be part of promoting that story. They can echo the sentiment, and they can say the words that the brand says. They can use your language, but they can actually be characters within your brand story. So if you're a running coach and you're looking to work with influencers, and maybe your unique selling point is you're the best person at getting 5K PBs, and there's a series of runners that they want that. That's desirable, a new 5K PB. I'd love that. Maybe you can literally work with influencers to take them through the story and show how you get them the 5K PB. And they're not there saying, oh, this guy, he's the best, he does 5K PBs. They're actually going through the story and the characters in it, and they come away with that. And so as an asset, that's really strong. And as a story, that they become characters within it. They're not just sort of just disseminating the message. They're very much part of it.
I think this is a really good example of where using content creators' creativity is a massive benefit. You know, the responsibility of coming up with the stories is not purely on the shoulders of the person responsible for marketing. You can rely on these people to come up with some great ideas for your brand, pick the best ones and run with them, and that can often end up turning into something that becomes kind of integral to your marketing activity going forward.
Yeah, for sure, and that leads us on to the point that we've probably touched on a few times, but of course it's integral to understand that campaign purpose. So we won't dwell on this one too much because we've spoken a little bit about it, but understanding this it really is the crux of a campaign. So I would certainly encourage you to we've put it last because we want it to be for you to remember it, I suppose, but I think it really is the first step that you need to understand. So there's some key considerations that I think probably sort of just sit outside of these other questions, but they're really worth keeping in mind. And that's that content creators really are experts in creating content. I mean, this is what they do day in, day out. They're doing it whether you're working with them or not, and they're absolute experts in it. So as Simon mentioned just a moment ago, as we spoke about before that again, if you're looking for inspiration and creativity, they can help you there. If you've got a concept but you don't think it's especially creative, that's fine. You know, give them the brief and hand it over to them and see what they come up with. Sometimes you'll be surprised at the creativity that comes back. Really good content creators also, in fact, almost all content creators, care really deeply about their audience. We spoke about it at the top, that the audience is really specific and unique to each individual, but it's because they really care about them, and that's their greatest asset, so to speak. So I think it's really important that you make sure that you're respecting that and you're understanding that how they speak to their audience and how they treasure them is valuable to them, and it's probably the most careful that you have to be is making sure that you do respect that. And I think one thing I really want to stress is that there is no need to start large, particularly now. We don't need to see brands starting with 100 people ambassador programs necessarily. Of course, that's great if you can do that, but it's perfectly valid to start with just a handful of people. Just launch. You can test and learn. You can grow from there, and you can work in phases. So maybe you say these 6 months are about learning and getting things started. The next 6 months are about growing the program, and then next year, that's when we really hone it and hit the big time. So it's worth getting started, and you will find that you'll be learning, and it's much easier to learn with a manageable group. So the last thing that we mentioned that we wanted to speak about is very quickly, just 2 slides on considerations for the current climate. And I'm conscious of time, so apologies, we've run a little bit over. I think we'll just need another sort of three minutes of your time. If you have that, of course, I understand if indeed you need to get to the rest of your day. So feel free to drop us a line if you do have any questions. You can reply to any of the emails. My email is gabriel@freestak.com. But we'll move forward and go into some COVID considerations. So these are just some questions that we think it's really important to ask yourself before you're starting campaigns or putting any content out. So literally going through this, is this going to risk creating any insensitive or offensive content? Is it going to contribute to scaremongering? Does this encourage gatherings or social behavior which is not safe or acceptable in the current climate? Could it indeed negatively impact the reputation of your brand that you're partnering with? Will the content provide value to audiences? So obviously it's a really great opportunity to help with mental health or staying healthy and active. So there's questions there that are probably true of just generally, but I think at the moment, particularly questions around social gatherings and behavior, it's really pertinent and important to consider. So certainly worth asking yourself those questions. And I think something I wanted to leave you guys with is, I read a really interesting piece by a gentleman called Craig Mousley, who spoke about what audiences are looking for from brands at the moment. And there's sort of 2 pillars that we're looking to for brands to help with, and that's help and comfort. So if you're a brand that is able to help audiences in a time like this, you've almost got a responsibility to tell them, and don't be shy in it. That's why at-home exercise has been really valuable, because people have been really yearning for that, and brands that have executed it well have done really well. And similarly, it could be nutrition, or it could be mental health, or whatever it is. But if you can help, that's amazing. Let them know, and that's wonderful. Maybe it's comfort that you can provide, and that is so valuable. So if you can distract your audience from the current hardship, that has tremendous value, and you should absolutely be proud of yourself and do that. And I think that the main point to leave us with is obviously doing the right thing and continue to do that post-corona is crucial. People are going to remember the brands that do the right thing now, and they're going to reward them for it later. So I think there is a social responsibility there, which people are going to be rewarded for, which is wonderful. So just to sum up, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen, and then we're going to let you go. So obviously, influencer marketing remains an effective way to be talking with your audience, even in the current situation, which is wonderful. And it will continue to be so. It's a nimble form of marketing. Obviously, each campaign is different, but these questions and these rules that we've gone through will hopefully help you shape your campaigns. But of course, if you do have any questions, we're happy to answer them and help you out with that. And of course, influencer marketing is a really effective way to just integrate with your existing marketing. You don't need to come up with a whole new campaign. Simply integrate it with the launches that you're doing, or the language that you're putting out there, or the point of the content that you're putting on your own socials. You can integrate it with that, and it's a really effective way to start building from there. And importantly, respecting the current crisis, not making missteps and not being tone deaf to the current environment is really important, and to continue doing the right thing as we move forward and move on from this. So in the interest of time, we won't bore you with this one too much, other than to say this is obviously our bread and butter. We've managed ambassadors and content creators and influencers for many years, from building programs, growing them. We've obviously got a tool which Simon mentioned at the top, which helps with many steps of this creation phase, from the recruitment to the analytics of it. We certainly have automated wherever possible that process, and certainly happy to talk to you a little bit about how that works. But maybe most importantly, I'll just leave the slide up for a moment. We've got a link here, which is to a cheat sheet about how to create an influencer marketing campaign. So I talked a little bit about what we've spoken about today, but it's maybe a really helpful resource for you to be able to refer back to. So bit.ly/IM cheat sheet. IM for influencer marketing cheat sheet. So if you want to write that down and jump on that in a minute, please do feel free to do so, and you'll be able to download the cheat sheet and refer back to that one at a later date. But otherwise, I think we've got our email on the next slide, which again, feel free to jot that down and get in touch if you have any questions. But thank you so much for your time and joining us this morning. And apologies, we ran a few minutes over, but yeah, we get a bit excited and maybe go on for a little bit. But yeah, really do appreciate your time. So have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate and say thank you everyone for joining us. That was great, and thank you very much to Gab for a really comprehensive and well delivered presentation there. We look forward to speaking to some of you soon, I hope.